All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Occupy Fantasy YouTube channel. I am Brian Juster, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy. Tonight, we're here with some DraftKings MMA DFS UFC Vegas 32 card. Best bets, picks, lineup advice, FanDuel tips, you name it. We're here to get you all set for Saturday's UFC slate. We'll be here for about 30 minutes or so. We're recording this live Friday evening. The replay will be available all the way up until lock, which is 4 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. If you have questions while we're doing the show, throw them in the live YouTube chat. If you're watching this replay, comment on the video below, or better off, hop in our Discord channel, the best way to get your UFC DFS and betting questions answered. I'm joined as always by Jake the Snake, owner of MMA DFS.com. Jake, what's happening, dude?
What's up, man?
Recording this live Friday evening. The replay will be available.
Give me 1 second here, guys.
4 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. If you have questions while we're doing the show,
repeated
throw them in the
my
live
ears.
YouTube chat.
1 second.
If you're watching this replay, comment on the video below, or better off, hop in our Discord channel.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that, guys. Sometimes I leave the tab open of the video, and I get a 10-second delay replayed back in my ears, and I just scramble to find out which of my 75 tabs has the video open. So the tab is now closed, and we're good to go. So again, we're here for 30 minutes. If you have questions, throw them in the chat. It is an 11-fight card. Corey Sandhagen, TJ Dillashaw. Very interesting slate. Jake and I were talking about one of the newcomers on the card, and we were talking about some of the fighters we're looking to target. We were laughing before the show started because it is a pretty good slate. Jake, let's start with this main event: Sandhagen versus Dillashaw. Dillashaw coming off the long layoff. The last fight he did fight, he got knocked out in like 30 seconds. So break down this fight for me from a DFS perspective, what it means for low risk and high risk lineups, and if there's any difference between FanDuel and DraftKings.
Yeah, for sure. So we got Dillashaw coming back from the 2-year suspension for PEDs. He last fought January 2019 against Henry Cejudo when he tried to drop down to 125 pounds for the first time. Didn't work out well, even with the EPO or whatever he was taking. Immediately knocked out. Interestingly, Sandhagen actually fought on that same card. He landed a first-round submission win of his own. Since then, he's gone 4-1. His only loss was to Aljamain Sterling. Meanwhile, Dillashaw has been on the sidelines, as we all know. Sandhagen has now won 9 of his last 10 fights. So, I mean, impressive streak, just completely dominating right now. In terms of DFS, both these guys are pretty high-volume strikers. Sandhagen lands almost 7 significant strikes per minute, second highest on the slate. Dillashaw is a little behind him at a little less than 5.5. Dillashaw is a little bit more of a grappler. He's got a wrestling background. We could see him mix in a little bit of grappling here. Sandhagen has a 30% takedown defense, but decent submission skills off of his back, so he's not helpless on the ground, but theoretically, Dillashaw could get it there, although we're expecting more of a striking match. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of low risk, we think it's going to be a high-scoring fight. We think that there's a good chance to get an early finish, good chance that Sandhagen finishes him in the first 2 rounds. And if he does that, obviously it's probably going to be a big score unless he gets another, early round 2 finish that just unfortunate timing like the Marlon Moraes fight. More likely than not, it would put up a big score. And if it does go longer, we're expecting a high-volume score where the winner would score well. So it's hard to see this fight not doing well. So low risk, it's just your normal stack the main event type of week on DraftKings. And then in high risk, you're probably going to want one of these guys in the majority of your lineups. The one way it fails is if Sandhagen wins, but then gets outscored by 2 of the other expensive fighters, and he just gets pushed out of the winner. So, I mean, that's kind of the one scenario. Other than that, I don't really see it being left out. I mean, if Dillashaw wins, at his price, he's probably, it's hard to see him not getting into the optimal lineup. So really, it's a fight we're looking to target heavily in both low risk, where you're stacking, and high risk contests. So yeah, I mean, I think it should be a good fight. I mean, I think Sandhagen's going to win, and I think he probably gets a finish early, but you never know. I mean, it's a high variance match. You get Dillashaw coming off the long layoff. So, I mean, I think it's going to be a good one. I mean, what's your take on it?
Yeah, coming off of last week where it was one of the rare weeks where we said don't stack the main event in your low-risk lineups, Makhachev and Moises. Makhachev continued his streak of not allowing more than 13 significant strikes, proving why that wasn't a stackable fight. But this is a fight that is incredibly stackable. It should be high volume. Even if Dillashaw gets knocked out in the first round or 2, he should be putting up striking numbers. And the reason you stack
in low risk on DraftKings and UFC DFS is to pretty much guarantee a 100-point score, and that's probably going to happen with whoever wins this fight. So definitely the way to go there. And like you said, Dillashaw at his price is the reason he ranks near the top of the model, is because if he does win, it's going to come. He's going to have some wrestling, or it's going to have a finish, and he's going to be a top scorer and an optimal at that price. And again, it's really tough to fail, which, from a high risk perspective makes it tough. But there's a slate where we can leave some salary, a slate where we can play some low-owned fighters. So there's plenty of ways to get different in your tournament and satellite lineups. So I agree with what you wrote in our daily plug, Jake. Play one of these fighters in pretty much every lineup that you make, and you'll be off to a good start. So let's move on a little bit. We always like to talk about newcomers, wide ranges of outcomes. There's no real stats on them. You have to grind the tape or rely on Vegas odds, and most people are lazy and just rely on the Vegas odds, which don't always tell the full story with these newcomers. Jake, we have just one newcomer, and I'm going to bring up the Occupy model here. OccupyFantasy.com ranks every fighter, FanDuel, and DraftKings. And the one fighter that is a newcomer, she is a late replacement. It's Elise Reed. Jake, she is miraculously 4-0 in her MMA career, and she is the largest underdog on the slate against Eubanks.
Yeah, so I mean, she's stepping in. It's only her 5th pro fight. Interestingly, in her 2nd pro fight, she got thrust into the Cage Fury strawweight championship fight somehow, and her first pro fight was at atomweight. And I mean, it doesn't say much for Cage Fury if they're bringing in some 1-0 atomweight and putting them straight into a title fight.
Do you know if they only have championship fights in that league?
I don't know. I don't follow it enough. I'm only following it when we're going back and looking at the tape.
Right.
But it certainly seems that way if they're bringing in 1-0 atomweights to compete for their belt. That might be the league where they basically say they put a belt up every week, and it's this fake belt. Like, it's not. I mean,
very
completely takes away the whole meaning of it. But so I mean, either way. So her 2nd pro fight, after fighting at 105 pounds, she moves up to 115 pounds. Takes on like a 5'7" fighter. Reed's like 5'3", or I think she was listed at 5'1" in that fight, but the UFC has her listed at 5'3". I mean, I don't know. Anyway, she's much shorter. Took on this much taller fighter. It looked like she won the first round, and we were kind of talking about it. It kind of looked like she won, or she lost the last 2 rounds, but she won the decision. So she wins that belt in her 2nd pro fight, and then she defends it twice. One of those was another grappling heavy decisions where it was kind of like, did she win? Did she lose? Like, no one knew. Like, the commentators didn't know. Like, watching it, it was, well, she got controlled the whole fight, but she was landing like punches off her back. So it was kind of weird. And then the most recent fight, she got a late round 2 TKO stoppage through ground and pound. Again, it was playing out on the ground, which kind of makes it seem like Eubanks is going to take her down and control her. So Reed's like a Taekwondo fighter. Her whole style is based on movement, like throwing kicks in bunches. Definitely not grappling. She has no grappling. If she gets taken down, she will like throw up a bunch of strikes off her back, but she's not going to compete in a grappling battle. And Eubanks is a black belt. This looks like a tough matchup for Reed. She's a former atomweight. Eubanks is coming down from 135 pounds. This is her first fight back down at 125. She's going to look huge tomorrow. She's got a big size advantage. Like, even at weigh-ins, like immediately after weight cuts, you could still tell she was way bigger. But after she rehydrates tomorrow, I mean, Eubanks is going to tower over her. So
yeah,
it's weird.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, this is the prototypical fight, and we see it a couple times a year where we have a UFC veteran who doesn't put up great scores, but then gets a newcomer on short notice, and the matchup's perfect. We saw this with Lauren Murphy a couple fights ago, and I think this sets up the same way, Jake, where Eubanks should dominate Reed on the ground. I mean, Reed got dominated by non-UFC level talented for 2 of the last 3 fights on the ground, and Eubanks should put up a massive score. And to me, it's great because we have Eubanks projected for less than 25% ownership on DraftKings. And I think she makes for an excellent play at that range because she could just absolutely explode in the grappling department and get a finish. And Reed, I will say, the fact that she does muck it up and throw a ton of strikes, she's not just some, she's not out there just dancing around. She's throwing strikes. So if it is close, she could somehow win a decision. We've seen it happen 2 of her 4 fights. The fact that she throws volume, and on DraftKings, she'll get points on the ground throwing those insignificant strikes. At least I'm going to throw in some lineups, but to me, the big story for this newcomer is her opponent and the big ceiling that Eubanks has.
I mean, it's kind of crazy. Eubanks has been to 9 straight decisions, and despite being a black belt, she has never submitted anyone. So it's kind of a tough one. You're looking at it, you're like, is she going to get a finish? Like, she never finishes anybody. She has 2 TKOs in her career, and they came in like her first 3 pro fights, but she should get a finish here. And it's like, how has she never gotten a submission? Like she almost submitted Julia Avila in that one fight. She came close a few times. So, I mean, if she can do that against Reed, I assume Reed, is not going to be on that same level for defending submissions, and Eubanks will probably land one. So it's not like she's incapable of landing a submission, and she could also finish it through ground and pound. Like, Eubanks has power, so it's kind of crazy she never gets finishes. But at the same time, I mean, you definitely look at her record. It reminds me of Tisha Torres when she took on the newcomer, and we're like, there's no way she gets a finish. And then the end of round 1, it's like a doctor stoppage because the other girl went blind after the round. Like, totally reminds me of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, some of these girls, their ceilings have been capped in recent fights, but when you just throw them bait like this, then we can really see their true ceiling.
Right.
I encourage everyone, after you finish watching this video, just type in YouTube the weigh-ins, the face-offs, and you'll see why we think Eubanks can get a finish. Just look at those 2 girls in their face-offs. So, all right, let's talk about some fights we actually want to target. A lot of fights this week. Jake, I have the daily plug up on screen. Jake writes it for OccupyFantasy.com every single week. Fighters to target, fights to target, best bets, and then specifically lineup strategies, how to build the best DFS lineups every single week, depending on how the slate looks. And Jake had a bunch of fights we want to target this week that you wrote up. I feel like we're going to start with Arce and Yule. Is that your favorite fight?
That is not my favorite fight.
just giving Jake a hard time. Arce and Yule is projected for the lowest owned combined fight on the entire card, which means there's definitely some chaos potentially with that fight, but only for the biggest contest. There are definitely other fights, Jake, that have a much higher likelihood of reaching their ceilings.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be Brian's highest exposed fight is Arce and Yule. But, I mean, there's 2 obvious fights that, like, I don't even think I need to tell you because everyone's going to be targeting that their exposure is going to be crazy high between the combined fighters. But Yana Costa and Soriano Allen are going to be super popular fights to target. We have them projected at, like, 75% combined ownership, roughly. And, I mean, for good reason. I mean, all those guys are great at scoring points in DFS. So it's always hard when you have like 2 good guys going against each other. Oftentimes we see that fails. They almost cancel each other out. But I think it's going to be hard for those fights not to produce high scores. But you never know. I mean, weird things happen. Costa's never been in a fight that lasted longer than 6 minutes and 12 seconds or something. Watch that fight go to a decision.
I know.
Like watch Allen control Soriano and then that be a lower scoring decision. But, Soriano, all of his wins or all of his finishes have come in the first round, I should say. His 7 first-round finishes. He's 8-0. He had 1 fight against Jamie Pickett on Dana White's Contender Series go to a decision. And he definitely looked to slow down the last 2 rounds, which is, I think that's how that fight would fail, is if it gets out of the first round, Soriano starts to slow down, but Allen can't get a finish. And, it's a close enough fight that neither guy dominates. But both those guys, I mean, they pretty much always score well. So there's also a really good chance one of them puts up a big score. But Soriano is going to be the most popular non-Corey Sandhagen fighter on the slate. So
let me ask you that real quick, Jake, just to interrupt. Like we've talked about before, remember Daniel Rodriguez after his first couple of fights, just put up massive scores, and we kept telling people he's due for some negative variance, or just he's due for some regression in the knockdown department, in the scoring department. Do you think that's the case for Soriano here? Because he put up 2 scores of like 120 plus DK points, a couple knockdowns in both, I believe. It just feels like as he steps up in talent here a little bit, that his ceiling's definitely lower than what we've seen in his first 2 fights. And I think his ownership's probably a little inflated because of that.
Right. I mean, you're going to watch his ownership go up while his chances of getting a finish go down. So at some point, he's not going to get a finish. So is it this fight? Is it next fight? I mean, it's going to be one of them. Like, he's not just going to finish everyone in the first round forever. I mean, unless he's like the greatest fighter of all time and we're watching the beginning of his career, which I don't think that's really the case. So
fast forward 5 years, we talk about the undefeated champion Soriano.
right. 25-0 Soriano with all first round finishes. I mean, there's always going to be that one guy, and we're going to fade him every time. But the other 99% of the guys will be right on. I agree, man. He's got to bust eventually. the guy is crazy strong, and he's got a wrestling background, which makes it really tough on a wrestler like Brendan Allen. Like, we saw Brendan Allen get in a striking match with Sean Strickland. Didn't end well for Brendan Allen, you know. He tried to punch his way to victory and gets knocked out in the second round. So either I don't think he's going to do that again because he probably learned his lesson 2 fights ago. But if Soriano's wrestling is good enough that he can keep the fight standing up, Allen has looked susceptible to getting knocked out. So I don't know, man. It's a tricky spot. Like, I would love to say, like, oh, yeah, this is definitely the time Soriano busts. You know, totally fade him. Half the field's going to be dead after that fight. But there's a pretty good chance he gets that first round finish. So, I don't know. Tricky spot. I think you want to hedge, you know. You don't want to, like, be all in off him, and you don't want to be all in on him. Like, I think the move is to be a little bit under the field, so you have a little bit of leverage when he busts. But if he does go off, you're not dead. I mean, that's my take. I don't know what you're doing with him.
Yeah, I mean, I think just by nature, you have to be under on the field on him. He's nearly 50% owned on an 11-fight card, and he's in a 3-round fight. I think you just have to. The fact that he's 8,200 makes it really difficult. And the fact on FanDuel he's $15, he's going to be probably over 50% owned there. So it makes it really tough. I mean, you really only have one choice. It's just don't play him in one lineup, or if you're playing multiple lineups, play him less than 50%. And just hold your breath for 5 minutes and pray he doesn't just destroy Allen in the first, couple minutes of the fight. That's really all you can do. It sucks, but that's what you have to do in these situations, even though he's in a really good spot and the model ranks him really well. There's only one thing you can do when the ownership's that high for a 3-round fighter. So that's what I would do. And we do have a question here. I think this is an interesting question. It's kind of an extension of the fights to target. Ken asks in the chat, who are one or a couple fighters that you would just lock into a small field 3-max? So let's say it's a 3-max contest, 200 entries, 300 entries. This is similar. I've been playing the 5-5-5 a lot recently on DraftKings. And normally, Jake, what I would do is lock in one of the highest favorites on the card that I think can score well. For me, that would be Shajara Eubanks. I would lock in whichever main event fighter I'd like. That would be Sandhagen in this fight. Maybe one more fighter, an underdog that I like. But, Jake, I don't know if you have any other fighters for this card that you think, 3 lineups, 100, 200 entries max. What any fighters you would put in all 3 of your lineups?
So I really like Kyler Phillips here. I think that he's like the best combination of ceiling and floor and just like safeness to get a victory. I don't see Paiva winning that fight. I think Phillips has a higher ceiling than Eubanks. And I think he's pretty much just as safe. I mean, to be honest. So like I would lock in Phillips, lock in Sanhagen. Maybe you look at someone like Belbita, like a value play. I mean, in a smaller contest, I guess you probably just play Soriano.
That's the thing. I don't think I would. That's the game theory thing. It's right. It's like, okay, especially we've seen in smaller contests, the ownership gets even more inflated. Like he might be 70% in a small contest.
That's true.
In that case, if he doesn't do well, automatically you're cashing basically, unless the rest of your lineup really sucks. But
right. I mean, clearly I play mostly big contests. Yeah.
so there you go. There you go. I do want to note, I do have the model up here. Moose, our co-founder, working behind the scenes on some data stuff. He's added this new feature. We get a lot of suggestions and comments every week about how to improve the site. And now all the fighters, their UFC stats profile is linked in the model. So if you just click on their name, so Kyler Phillips, you click on the name, his UFC stats official profile comes up so you can see all their history and whatnot. So go check that out. If you have any questions about a fighter, you can always click on their name in the model now. Jake, you talked about Yana and Costa as a fight to target, and we got off track of there a little bit. And Corey in the chat wants to know our thoughts on Randy Costa. You talked about it. This guy has tons of knockouts, all combined less than a minute or whatever it is, 2 minutes. And he's going to be relatively popular just as a result of that. I mean, you have him projected for 33% projected ownership in the model. That's crazy for an underdog. But I would argue it's not like last week Billy Q, who could put up a score in so many different ways. Really, you need Costa to knock out a really talented fighter in Yanez in order to pay off that 33% ownership.
Yeah, man. You can just look at Costa's record. I mean, it's absolutely nuts. So he's got a 6-1 record. All 6 of his wins have come by round 1 KO in 2 minutes and 15 seconds or less, which completely unsustainable. I mean, we're talking about unsustainable on Soriano. Like, Costa's record is totally unsustainable. This is a massive step up in competition for him. Like, he's coming off a bunch of other guys that are either no longer in the UFC or have never won in the UFC, or even like all 4 of his pre-UFC wins came against guys with losing records. So like, he has never faced anyone like Yanez before.
Yanez is good, by the way. Like
Yanez is really good. Yeah. Really good. Like both these guys are good. Like Costa is good too, but he's kind of a one-trick pony from what we've seen from him. He'll come out crazy pace, come out to brawl, just immediately try to win fights in the first minute. And the only time he's been in a fight that lasted longer than 2.5 minutes, he got submitted early in the second round from a guy that's no longer in the UFC. That I believe he went like 2-5 in the UFC, Brandon Davis. And in fairness, he was oversized for the weight division. It was kind of a tough matchup just based on size alone. But Costa's submission defense looked pretty suspect there. Like Davis had no hooks in, was falling off the side, still choked him out in round 2. Yana is a black belt. Like if he feels like he's in trouble, he could easily take this fight to the ground and submit Costa. I don't know if he'll need to. I mean, like I know Yanis would much rather get a knockout. Like that, he said that that's what he wants to do, and that's like he hasn't even attempted a takedown the last 3 fights. The guy's such a good boxer, man. He's so clean, so crisp on the feet. You know, while Costa's a crazy brawler that's always throwing these crazy strikes from crazy angles, Yana is so technical and so good. But I mean, if Costa catches him with something, he's got power, man. Like, I don't think it's impossible for Costa to win this fight, but I'm picking Yanez to win this fight. So I think you play Costa for his round 1 win percentage, and you play Yanez for closer to his inside the distance percentage.
I think that's fair. And I think Yana's ownership reflects that, whereas Costa's does not. And I think that's where the edge lies in playing other underdogs this week. You know, in a vacuum, Costa looks like a good underdog play, but when you compare it with his ownership and how many other people are going to have him, he becomes less of a good play as a result. And again, that's the big thing about UFC DFS as we near the end of the show here is 10:23. You know, we can look at plays who are really good in a vacuum. Soriano, really good play. Costa, massive upside. But their ownership limits the way you can play them in DFS. And again, that's what we're playing a game here. We're trying to beat everyone else. We're not trying to score the most points. It's a big difference. So, Jake, the one guy we haven't talked about is the cover boy of the Daily Plug, and that's Jordan Williams. We do only have 7 minutes, so briefly, a minute. Let's talk about this fight, why the model likes him so much, why you like him so much, and why at less than 20% ownership, he's probably the best tournament fighter on the entire card.
Yeah, so we got Jordan Williams, type 1 diabetic for people that don't know. So he was fighting at 185 pounds, but he was only weighing in at like 181 pounds. So apparently he's on some new like stem cell experimental treatment that allowed him to safely cut weight. And he's now moving down to 170 pounds. So like he finally got this disadvantage off his back. And he wasn't doing terrible at 185. He knocked out Gregory Rodriguez in the first round on Dana White's Contender Series. You know, that's the guy that ended up beating Dusko recently. But anyway, so Jordan Williams, high volume guy. He'll mix in takedowns. Like, he's really good, and he's getting an easy matchup here. Mickey Gall is bad. Like, Mickey Gall is the only person that Mike Perry has beaten in his last 5 fights. He's a quote-unquote submission specialist, has never knocked anyone out, but really hasn't faced anyone good. Like, if you dig deeper into Mickey Gall's record, like, it's really bad. Like, he came into the UFC in his second pro fight. You know, his first 3 fights were against guys that had never fought professionally before. He's coming off back-to-back decisions. He's lost 2 of his last 3. Get knocked out by Diego Sanchez. I mean, I feel like that says everything you need to know about Mickey Gall. So Jordan Williams has a good matchup. He's coming down a weight class. You know, he's a high-volume guy. He's 0-1 in the UFC. So, like, people are not... That's why he's going to be low-owned, is he got beat up in his last fight. He broke his orbital. He broke his nose. He cracked his vertebrae. I mean, he got headbutted twice. He got kneed in the groin. Like, it was one of the more painful UFC debuts just to watch from a viewing perspective. But, you know, by all accounts, he's fully healed now. I think it's a great spot for him. I think everything is lined up for Jordan Williams to have a big performance. And I mean, honestly, I think it's going overlooked by most people. I mean, it's possible his ownership projection is a hair on the low side, but I don't see him being very highly owned at his price tag. I think people are going to look in other directions. You've got a lot of other good plays. So Jordan Williams at $8,721, I don't think most people are going to go there. And I think he's got sneaky upside. And he could be the highest scorer on the slate. And he should get some takedowns defended from Gall, who went 0 for 6 on takedowns in his last fight.
Fire him up on FanDuel, too. I'm a big fan of Jordan Williams. The model likes him a lot, too. Definitely the best tournament play in the favorite range, I think, just from an ownership perspective. Right. Question from Ian in the chat. Favorite underdog? Jake, I'll let you answer. I'm going to give my answer. I think the best general underdog is probably, for me, Darren Elkins. And the best gross underdog, in my opinion, is Andre Ewell. I don't know if you feel differently.
I mean, I think that's pretty fair. I included both those guys in the plug. I think Ewell is a better FanDuel play just based on how he fights. You know, he's going to get a lot of significant strikes, maybe some takedowns defended. Generally doesn't score well in DraftKings. We have less underdogs technically now because Belbita's a coin flip. Allen's a coin flip. I mean, I think Macy Barber has to look better than she did in her last fight, right? I mean, she can't look worse. I mean, she looked so bad last time coming off that knee injury. I think that she's going to be trying to reprove herself. I know the line's gone a little bit away from her, and she's got a really tough matchup in Maverick, but I think Macy Barber's interesting, especially on FanDuel. It kind of fits her game more with significant strikes, takedowns defended. But no, I totally think Elkins has a big ceiling. I think Minner's the type of guy, he's gonna land a submission or get submitted. And Elkins has been the type of guy that when he wins, he oftentimes puts up big wrestling performance scores. So it's actually a good matchup for Elkins, even though I think he probably loses. If he does win, he's going to be a high score. So I would say Elkins, Barber. I liked Belbita as an underdog, but I mean, technically she's not a dog anymore. And you could say the same for Allen. I think Imavov is sort of interesting, but I think more so on FanDuel as well. He should get takedowns defended. Heinisch has, I want to say, 18% takedown defense. Imavov looked pretty good on the feet against Jordan Williams. I mean, that's who beat Jordan Williams in his first fight. And then he got pinned against the cage by Hawes in his second fight. I don't see him putting up a huge score, but he's kind of an interesting value play similar to Ewell. But it's a little bit of a weird slate for dogs because we have the guy Costa that looks great, but he's going to be overowned and probably doesn't win. And then we have a couple guys we like that are coin flips. And then there's some people in tough spots. So, yeah, I mean, Elkins, Barber, I think those are kind of the plays I'm looking at.
Yeah, I mean, the two dogs with the highest ceilings are also going to be the highest owned, but they're also pretty likely to lose in the main event underdog and
Right,
Dillashaw
right.
and then Randy Costa. So interesting slate from that perspective. All right, it is 10:28. It's time to get us out of here with the stream parlay of the week, best bets. Jake, did we hit last week or no?
Well, I picked the guy that had the fight canceled. So your leg hit, so I guess that counts as a hit.
You know what? We got to take the wins we can get them here. And yes, we will count that as a win. So we're trying to go back-to-back on stream parlays. Parlay, even if it's reduced to one leg, it still counts as a win here on the stream parlay of the week. So, Jake, I got your best bets from the Daily Plug up here on screen. Had a big week last week, so congrats on that. Jake, I'm going to throw it to you first. I'm going to let you decide our first leg of the stream parlay.
Cool. I'm going to go with Phillips inside the distance at plus 280.
Yeah, that's a great bet. That's the guy you said has a high floor, high ceiling. Full ceiling hasn't been shown yet. Gets a great opponent this time around. So Phillips inside the distance plus 280. I like that a lot. See, now I got to think about what I'm going to go with here because I did. You know what? I'm being put on the spot a little bit. I didn't prepare. I do. You know what? I do like your bet of Minner and Elkins ends in a submission plus 190. That wasn't a fight I was initially looking at for a bet, but the way these two guys fight, I think that's incredibly likely. I'm surprised it's not a little bit higher than that. So I'll go with that. Minner and Elkins ends in submission plus 190.
Cool. I like it, man. I love that bet. I wish that bet was like 220 or something, but I mean, maybe that's asking too much. But
I mean, it's a little greedy, but
it's a little bit greedy. All right. So between these two, the parlay should be about 10-1. So that'll be a good start to, getting us back on track.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get that back. Let's go 2 in a row and 3 total bets in a row that will hit if that goes. Jake, really quick, we do have a couple more seconds and we don't have any questions. Give me your favorite long shot bet. The way you were talking, if you're watching this and you're reading between the lines, you probably could have predicted that Jake would have thrown out Yana submission plus 1100 the way he was breaking down that fight. Jake, is that your favorite long shot bet or do you have another one?
So I like that, but my only concern is that Yana is so good with his hands. I think he could just get a knockout. Like, I think he'll get the submission if he needs to get the submission, but I'm not sure if he'll need to. Okay. So I like the value on the bet, but I don't like it as much in terms of like something I think that'll actually happen. I just like the value. In terms of long shots, I mean, is it just me or is every time Minner fights, his round one subline is plus 1,000?
I don't know why. Every time.
Every single time. It's the exact same. He has 20 round one submissions. Like, I mean, that almost has to be like, until they lower that almost has to be like my perma favorite long shot is just Minner round one sub. I mean, every time it makes no sense. Like, it's absolutely insane. Just totally insane.
Yeah.
So I really like that one.
I just don't know what the basis for that line is every time, because if he's going to win, that's how it's going to happen pretty much. So definitely not a 10% chance.
It should be
or whatever it
like
is.
plus 200 or
Yeah.
something. I mean, it's so far off. I guess as soon as it hits, it'll be super low the next time. But last time it was plus 1,000 against Charles Rosa. And I remember betting it. I was like, this is crazy. And of course it didn't hit that time. But please, Vegas, keep making it plus 1,000. I will keep betting the car on it every time.
So go bet that value play if you have an out at a legal sports book. Minor round one side plus 1,000. So, all right, that'll do it for the show. Jake, I do want to just ask you, just, quick hit. Who scores the most points on the slate, and which high-owned fighter bust?
All right. So I think our boy Jordan Williams is in for a massive score. I think that he's going to score the most on the slate. My backup would be Kyler Phillips. And in terms of who is going to bust, I think that it's going to be either Miranda Maverick or Soriano are going to bust. Can I have a hedge? Can I do two, or I got to pick one?
I'll break the tie. I'll say Soriano just out of pure game theory reasons bust. And high score, I'm gonna go Sarge. I mean, that's my type, right? The high priced female fighter who doesn't have a ceiling. That's my go-to move. So I'll say Sarge has the most points. But I'm with you on Jordan Williams, and I agree on the other two fighters that I think have a good chance of busting.
That's super on brand for you. So, I mean, I wouldn't have expected anything less.
I mean, that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to be consistent. So be sure to follow Jake on Twitter at DFS_MMA. Read his work at MMADFS.com. The sheet, which he writes every single week, breaks down every single fight, history of each fighter, betting and DFS implications. Go check it out. OccupyFantasy.com is where you can read the daily plug. Also written by Jake. Top plays, lineup strategies, best bets, FanDuel and DraftKings. Check out our Occupy model, which you see on screen here. It ranks every fighter, FanDuel, and DraftKings, with now links to each fighter's UFC stats profile, projected ownership as well. If you like what you saw here, make sure you click subscribe on YouTube. Get notified whenever we go live or uploading new videos. NFL preseason is right around the corner. We're going to have a ton of new YouTube content for the preseason and for the NFL regular season, so make sure you subscribe. If you want to see more UFC content, give us a thumbs up. Let us know that you like these types of videos. And again, if you have any questions, comment on the video below. Or the best way to get your question answered is to hop in our Discord channel. Links in the description below. OccupyFantasy.com/Discord is how you can join. Talk to Jake, talk to me, talk to other OccupyFantasy.com members. So for Jake, I'm Brian from Occupy Fantasy. Appreciate everyone listening. Good luck Saturday night.